Greetings viewers, Eric the Car Guy here, also known as ETCG1 on this channel. And on ETCG1 we start our videos with wishing you a happy birthday. Some people want me to drop that, but I'm not gonna, especially today because the day that I'm posting this video is my birthday. That would be November 30th. I was also born on a Monday. Kind of resented the day ever since, but that being said, I'm 45 in case you're wondering as of the posting of this video. Anyhow, today's topic, annual inspections, comes from the suggestion box from GSRGirl. She's a Canadian resident, and in Canada they have annual inspections for their vehicles. Now, she was living on the eastern part of Canada. I can't remember exactly where, but then she moved out to the western part of Canada over towards Vancouver way. She had a vehicle that, according to her mechanic, was perfectly fine. I looked it over and everything about it was tip-top. She drove it out to the West Coast and went to get it inspected over there, and they said, no, not so much. In fact, you're going to have to pay taxes, you're going to have to pay all these other things, and your vehicle is not falling in compliance according to our province. She was rather upset by this and ended up getting a GSR, ironically enough. I'd like to talk a little bit about annual inspections in this video, and I'm sure a lot of you are going to have a lot of things to add to this discussion. I'm just going to do a general overview based on my own personal experience. I hope you realize that this channel is about opinions, and we can all share opinions. I don't come out and say that these things are necessarily fact. They're just my opinions. Now that we've gotten the disclaimer out of the way, I used to possess a Pennsylvania state safety inspection as well as a Pennsylvania state emissions license many years ago, over 20 years ago now. However, I did go through the process of that, and I do have some working knowledge of it. Now, the state that I live in now, Ohio, has no such inspections, no safety inspections and no emission inspections. It's actually kind of a nice thing. They used to have such thing, but I'll get to why they don't now and why I'm happy to be living here as a result. I had to go through a rigorous testing process in order to get my safety inspection license and also my emissions license. I had to demonstrate competency, which is a good thing, not only in a written test, but also in a test where the instructor followed me around and checked off that I had done everything properly for the inspection. So there's a whole procedure that you need to go through. And in that procedure, especially up in the salt belt, we'll call it, you're going to find something oftentimes. Many times, people come around at that time of the year, their vehicles due for inspection and registration and insurance and all that stuff. And it hits them. I mean, you almost have to set aside, especially if you have an older vehicle, you have to set aside a little bit of money so that you can not only pass the inspection, but deal with any repairs that might come up as a result of things that might be found during the course of that inspection. Like I said, this is good for the shops because, let's face it, they kind of got you over a barrel. In order for you to get your vehicle registered, you need to have it pass inspection. A lot of shops, most shops, many shops were responsible about this, but once again, oftentimes when you put things in the hands of the public, you can find out how corrupt people can be. And there were some shops that were corrupt, basically advocating work that should not have been done, just to basically fatten out the work orders. But that's where the state troopers would come in. They would literally come into the shop, stand over your shoulder while you were doing an inspection and make sure that you did absolutely everything in that inspection correctly. And if you did not, the shop could have its inspection license pulled, which if you're in a state where state inspections, both either emission or safety inspections are there, or in any place that does that, let's just say if you don't have an inspection license, you're not going to do a whole lot of business because most of the time people are coming in for those inspections, and as I said, those inspections yield a lot of other things that go into the work order for repairs in order to come into compliance. You've got this power, so to speak. And as I said, most places responsible about the power, especially the place where I worked when I was in Pittsburgh, where we did those inspections. We were very conscious of the responsibility that we had, not only to the inspection process itself, but to the other drivers on the highway. Because these things came about because, let's face it, some people, and you've seen some things on this very channel that, well, let's just say were questionable. What is this thing doing on the road? And like I said, I'm in Ohio. I'm not in a place where they do these annual inspections. But it's interesting. I think the statistics prove, and I know somebody's going to jump into the comments and say one way or the other what the statistics say, but the statistics in states where they have the inspections and the states where they don't have the inspections, the percentage of vehicle incidents, accidents, and things that happen really aren't that much different. And that's odd because there are some vehicles out there that really shouldn't be on the road. But if you are a responsible vehicle owner and you you notice things. You notice when there's an issue that's arising. You've got a vibration or a noise or something that's not right with your vehicle. You give it attention. And I suspect if you're watching my channels that you may be doing that stuff yourself, and you might be hyper aware of your vehicle. Good for you. Not everybody is like that, so therefore they come about with these inspections. The state also gets a little piece of the inspection money, the money that's paid out for the inspection. So it is a revenue generating thing for many of the places that do these inspections. Now, emissions inspections on top of this mean that your vehicle falls into compliance in emission standards, and that is a whole other area. I had to get a separate license just for that. So it is possible to be licensed as a safety inspection mechanic, but not as an emissions inspection, and vice versa. Or you can have both, which I did. And in Ohio, now getting back to this, we used to have emissions inspections when I moved here years ago. It was like 20-some years ago that I moved to Ohio. And initially they were putting us, in fact, one of the old facilities is right across the street from my shop. And they have a chassis dynamometer, and they would put the vehicle on the dynamometer, run it, and check its emissions while it was going through what's called a California drive cycle here in the United States. And that varies the speed and varies the load on the vehicle to try to get it to act up. And if it falls within the correct parameters, great. Also, I should interject that there is the possibility, like well, first of all, vehicles only within the last 25 years are the ones, at least in Pennsylvania at the time, were the ones that required the inspection. So if your vehicle is older than 25 years old, you didn't have to worry about it. So that made those vehicles somewhat attractive. As far as emission standards go. The safety inspections were something that I believe was still required, although you could get a special set of tags that labeled your vehicle like a historical vehicle or a show vehicle or something like that, so it didn't necessarily need to fall within that because you're not driving it on a daily basis. Same was true for emissions testing, so if it was older than 25 years old, you didn't have to worry about it. But they had certain standards for vehicles depending upon how old they were. So vehicles within the past 5 years had certain standards and other vehicles had other standards. But then they also had the newer vehicles like post-1996 OBD2 vehicles. All they had to do is plug into the diagnostic connector and see if there were any pending codes and if all the drive cycles had been run. So in other words, they were weeding out the people that would bring their vehicles in and clear the check engine light just before they came in to pass the test. They could see that those drive cycles hadn't been run, and they would fail the test until those drive cycles had been run. The computer knows. And these are the things that Volkswagen recently manipulated in order to pass those emissions tests. But that's another video linked in the description. All right, so here we are. We're doing these things. Why? So why did these things come about in the first place? Cleaner air. Well, I think in Ohio it was demonstrated that the air quality didn't change one bit with emissions inspections or not, and they therefore dropped the program because it ended up being nothing more than an annual tax. Here's the slippery slope. I mean, I'm sure there were some instances in a safety inspection situation where somebody came in and there was something that could have been life-threatening. Some loose suspension part or something that could have caused a catastrophic failure at speed on the highway. As I said, the whole point was to make these vehicles safe on the roads. But as I said earlier, statistics don't necessarily prove that out. So do we leave it up to the vehicle owners to be responsible for keeping their vehicles maintained properly and to safely operate on the roads? Do we trust them to do that, or do we let the government come in and basically tell us what compliance is and what isn't? Yes, there are instances where it is going to make it better for somebody who's just ignorant of their vehicle and they don't understand it. It's not their thing. They don't pay attention to it. They're not one of us. And it's an economic thing also, let's face it. As I said before, if you come around to your annual inspection, you've got to pay for your vehicle registration, you've got to pay your insurance, and now you've got to pay for an inspection that could possibly equate to a few $1,000s. I believe there was also caps on the amount of money that you had to spend in order to bring the vehicle into compliance. And also, as far as emissions testing was concerned, if you failed an emissions test, you could actually come back for a retest and not have to pay for it a second time within a given period of time. You had to prove that you spent a certain amount to try and correct the issue. So if you had an engine, say, that was burning oil and causing high hydrocarbon emissions, but you went through and you spent like a couple $100s on a tune-up to get rid of the foul plugs and all the other stuff that even though you didn't technically pass the emissions test, you would be issued a waiver that allowed you to do it, that showed that you attempted to come into compliance. And I'm sure this is all over the place. In Europe, the UK in particular, I know you've got your MOTs, which are very similar in what I'm talking about here. And those, once again, are to keep the vehicles on the roads in compliance. And I believe, I'm not sure what your speed limits are or things over there, especially in places like the Autobahn. I can see like with the Autobahn where you got like an unlimited speed limit in spots, that you wouldn't want other vehicles on that road that were unsafe. Because that's not only a danger to yourself, but it's a danger to other people on the road. And that's where it's tough, because on one hand, it's like you're getting hit every year with an extra tax. You know, you're paying the government in order to drive your car one more year, plus you've got to pay the shop or whatever, or you've got to buy the parts to do the repairs yourself in order to be in compliance, in order to even drive on the road. Then on the other side of it, you don't want some yahoo that's next to you that's never done anything to their vehicle, just basically running into the ground, it's bald tires, everything, you know, blows one of those tires while they're driving next to you while you're driving 70 miles an hour down the highway. So there you have it. And in GSRGirl's case, she really got screwed over. She had to buy a whole new car and everything. In fact, the west coast of the United States has sort of a similar thing. I remember years ago, I don't know for a fact, I've never moved to California, but I know people that have moved to California from other states that have brought their vehicles in. Emission standards in California are different than they are in the rest of the country. In fact, for a while, they were making cars that were California state legal and then 49 state cars. So there were California cars and 49 state cars for a period of time. And if you brought a 49 state car into California that didn't correspond with California emissions regulations, then you had to pay, I think it was like $200 or something like that, just to get your vehicle registered, just to get your foot in the door. So you were better off selling your vehicle before you moved to California and then buying another vehicle when you got to California in order to be in compliance with their laws. California is sort of setting the standard. Usually things that happen there about 5 years later happen in the rest of the country. In fact, like I said, I think now most vehicles are 50-state vehicles, we'll call them. And when I say that, what I mean is that they comply to California emissions regulations and therefore comply to the regulations across the entire US. It's hard to say when you put things in the hands of a government whether or not they're going to be effective at what they do, because once you put a bunch of money in a bunch of people's hands, I'm not sure that they always do the responsible thing. And I'm not sure the responsible thing is even always possible. Lots of questions here. But annual inspections, do you have to conform to annual inspections? Do you have to deal with annual inspections where you live? And if so, what are your stories about those kinds of things? As I said, ETCG1 is a discussion, so we're opening it up to you for this discussion. Love to hear what you have to say about it. Hey, if you have automotive questions, however, I'd ask you to head over to ericthecarguy.com. Welcome video there to tell you about the stuff to help you with those types of things. If you wish to connect with me socially, Google+, Facebook, Twitter, also Instagram, and I close each of my videos with be safe, have fun, stay dirty. I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.